Okay, in today's video, we're going to go through and answer all the frequently asked questions that people send us pretty much every day about Screed chairs. So this is through all of our different social medias that we post on. People have been asking very similar questions that we're going to answer today. The first one we're going to answer is what or why should I use Screed chairs? What are Screed chairs and why should I be using them?
I think the main reason that we use the screed chairs hold a temporary screed rail, and so we can set our grade before we pour, and then doesn't matter what you use to screed with, your grade is set using these temporary rails, and the screed chairs hold the temporary rails. We pull those rails out after we've screeded off of them. So if you're using a roller screed, if you're using a 2x4, whatever you're using, your grade is, by setting your screed chairs with the rails, you set your temporary or you're setting your grade that you can screed off of, and that doesn't change. So you could go back, say you're using a vibrating screed, you could go back over it several times, and if without having those rails in there, you can't really go back that easy without reshooting your grades if you don't have any kind of rails in there. So whatever type of screed you're using, you screed over the top, and if you're not happy with it, go back over it again, screed it again. Like with a roller screed, we'll go over it several times. And so the main reason to use these is to set, before you pour, is to set your grade, and this is what you're screeding off of, and it holds your grade. It's like having a form in the middle of your concrete. Or if you're against, say you're against basement walls where there's no form to screed off of, you'll set these rails up, and now you have something that is already set to grade before you pour, to screed off of. And so it gives you perfectly flat 2-grade concrete, and that's why we use them. That's why everybody should be using them.
Another benefit too to using the rails is anybody can screed the concrete. We've seen tons of videos on YouTube, on all the different social medias of different crews and how they pour, and most of the time people are shooting cow patties, but then they're having their most experienced workers out there screeding the concrete, because it has to be, you have to be really good at screeding in order to get it flat when you're just shooting off of, or you're screeding off of the cow patties, because you don't want to dig too deep or you don't want to leave humps. So having the rails in there though allows anybody to screed, because you can set your rails to grade, and then you don't have to worry about whoever's screeding digging too deep or leaving humps, because you can visually see it and you're just screeding right off of the rail. So it's very foolproof, and anybody can screed at that point. I mean, we have high school kids that come in every year that are always helping us, and they come for the summer, and we can throw them on a screed because we don't have to worry about them screwing it up.
And this is all reusable. I mean, you can buy your pipes or your flat bar rails once and use them for many years. It's not like you're buying them for every pour. So we still have pipes that we've been using for 20 years. So as long as you can keep them straight so they don't get bent, there's no reason you can't continue to use the same pipes. And then the screed chairs, if you can reach them, just pull them out, reuse them. They're metal, they don't break. Just wash them off and reuse them. And the ones that are out in the middle that you can't reach, well, leave them in. If you want to walk out there and get them, and then use some sort of a float or something or shovel to pat your way back out, fill your holes, your footprints back out. You can pull those out too. But so this is the system. The only thing you'd have to continue to buy once you bought your rails is your screed chairs, and you don't even have to buy that many of them if you're pulling them out and reusing them. So,
and that's actually the next question is, do you leave them in the concrete?
And that's what we say, is if you can reach them, pull them out and reuse them. If you can't get to them very easy without walking out there, just leave them in. The cost is really low compared to being able to making mistakes while you're screeding. The cost of these are dirt cheap to buy and how easy they are to set up, how quick they are to set up, there's no reason people shouldn't be using these, even if you're screeding by hand.
Okay, the next question is, do you pull the rails out or do you leave the rails in? We get that one often.
Okay, so as you're screeding, say you're pouring something that's 20 foot wide by 20 foot long. And so if you have a 10 foot, or say you'd have 11 foot screed board, 2x4 that you're using, and you want to screed this whole thing at once, then you would put a rail down the middle of this at the 10 foot mark. And you'd use, say, an 11 foot board, and you would screed off that form on the one side and your temporary rail on the other side. And so you screed down one side. If you're using you'd be using a 10 foot screed rail. You'd pull it down, finish screeding the one side, move it back up, and jump over and screed the other side. And so you're obviously, when you're done screeding, the rail comes out. The rail doesn't stay in. And on something like that where you don't need to walk the middle, and you can't reach the screed chairs, you'd probably just leave them in.
And then that brings up the next question people always ask is, when you move the rail out, does it leave a cold joint? What is a cold joint? What causes that?
When some of the concrete, say something you poured earlier, dries or starts to harden up quicker than the stuff that meets it, so your newer stuff that you're meeting it. So if you're pouring okay, so let's just talk about this. Let's say this is 20 foot by 20 foot, just a square pad. So if we're using, say, an 11 foot 2x4, and that's what we're screeding with, so we would do a temporary rail right down through here. Okay, so we'd set our screed chairs, put our temporary rail, and then we have 11 foot 2x4 that we would screed with. And then you would be using a 10 foot screed rail. So as you screed your concrete, you pour this side first, and what you could do is you could screed down here to the end of this rail, jump over and screed down here, and then as soon as both sides are poured, on something this small, you would probably pour this whole side, then jump over and pour this side. Let's say you're pouring something that's this long, then what you're going to want to do is pour it in sections so you can't get a cold joint. So if it took you an hour to pour this section out right here, if it took you an hour to pour that out before you jumped over here, you're probably going to have a cold joint, no matter what type of system you're using. But this should take you 10 minutes, and your mud's not going to harden in 10 minutes. So as you pour this out in 10 minutes, you jump over and then pour this out, your mud's going to mesh together really well. And you're talking, this thing doesn't break all the way through the concrete. You're either using an 1.5 to 2 inch flat bar, or you're using a 1.5 to 2 inch round bar through there, so it's not like you're breaking all the way through the concrete. So the key, this is why we use mechanical screeds, because the key to this is to pour this out as quick as possible, and then you continue to move down. So if you're pouring these big long sections, strips like this, you would pour this section, then this section, then move down, pour this section, move down, this section, so you don't get cold joints. You're continuing, because what would be the difference between pouring this out and then jumping on to continue that pour, which everybody does? Why isn't this a cold joint? You know, by the time you get to here, because why isn't this concrete too hard and you get a cold joint here? It's the same thing. You're going to continue down through there, but on something like this, you do try to set your rails at the points where you're going to make your cuts too. So on something like this, you'd be making cuts in 10 foot squares, and so you'd have a cut down the middle of this. So to avoid cold joints, it's speed, how fast you can pour.
let's say in something like this, if we were to pour, say this is 20 foot wide. Okay, say this is 20 foot wide and 100 feet long. And you're pouring up against a building. So this is a building. And this is open here. Something like this, what you could do is you'd run your row or you'd run your temporary rail, so your screed chairs down this edge, and then we would use a roller screed, and we would screed from here all the way across. And so then we'd pull that whole thing, and as you go 10 feet, you roller screed 10 feet, then you'll pull this rail down, do the next 10 feet, pull the rail down, do the next 10 feet. Or you can get these rails in 20 foot, same thing. And so there's no way that you're gonna get a cold joint in this little area by only pouring 10 feet at a time and then pulling your screed down. So as far as getting cold joints, you can get a cold joint on anything by letting your concrete just sit. We don't leave the rails in, we pull the rails down as we're pouring. The faster you can pour in any situation, the better off you are.
Another question too that we get asked is, do we sell the rails? No, we don't. They're really expensive to ship, but also you could go to any local metal dealer or people that make metal in your local area and find them. So the metal's nothing special. It's just 2" by 3/8" inch flat stock. Is it just
stock, and it's you're probably about 40, maybe between 35 and $50, depending on where you're buying it from, for a 20-foot rail. That's the pipe might be a little bit more, but you're probably somewhere between the 20 to or 35 to $50 range for a 20-foot length of pipe or a 20-foot length of flat bar. So your 1.5" flat bar is gonna be a little cheaper than that probably, but then you can cut them in half. We have several that are 10-foot lengths, so we'll just buy a 20-foot length, cut it in half. Now we have 10-foot lengths, and then you can. And the reason we use 10-foot lengths, they're a lot easier to pull through the concrete than a 20-foot length. But sometimes we use 20-foot lengths on big long pours, so the 20-foot lengths are nice because you're not pulling it down as often. So
yeah, well, and on top of that, so when you specifically with the flat bar, I think everybody can look at the round, and when you pull it down, there's clearly a gap there that needs filled with mud. But with the flat bar, when you pull it down, people are asking, do you need to fill that gap, or can you just float over it?
Okay, it depends on what you're pouring. So if you're pouring, something that's really, really precise, say engineered floors for commercial construction or industrial construction, where they're actually checking your floors, then I would definitely fill those gaps with a little bit of mud. Anytime we use the round bar, we fill the gaps. So as you pull the bar down, you'll get out there and you'll fill the gaps, pat it in, and then float over it. With the round bar, we're only 3 inches wide, and if you're using the 1.5" bar, you're 3 inch. It's 3/8 of an inch wide, so it's really thin gap. And if you float over it, you'll never notice the difference. And I know we've said this in the past, and people rip us apart for it, but the concrete fills in itself. You'll never notice. Like on anything residential, you get bigger variations from people hand screeding with the screed going up and down. So if you don't have anything, if you're shooting cow patties and you think that you're getting perfectly flat concrete, most likely you're not. And yeah, so you just float over it. The flat bar, the round, you can't just float over. You got to fill. The flat, either way, you can do it either way depending on how the tolerance of the concrete. So a lot of times anything residential we're doing, or anything that's not say outside concrete that doesn't have to be perfect, maybe that's sloping so you're not standing water, then we'll just float right over the top of that. And sometimes you do need to fill some areas. It's just, you just have to look at it and see if you can see a dip or not. But most of the time with the flat bar, we'll just float right over it.
Yeah, until you see it too, actually in person. Like the void is so small. Like a lot of the time when you pull that rail out the mud just goes together by itself.
Yeah, it closes in.
Okay, the next question is, how far do I space my screed chairs?
I would say about every 2 to 3 feet.
What if you got a heavier screed? Some people have asked that, like normal hand screeding or using a roller screed.
If it's
or vibe
pretty
screed.
heavy, I'd go 2 feet, you know. And if it's not too heavy, you do probably 3 feet.
Next question. What size of rebar are they made for?
It's 1/2-inch rebar. So I mean, we can do them for 5/8. We don't because it's a waste. But we've had some requests where people only have 5/8 rebar. They say on the job, but it's the cost is quite a bit higher. There's really no reason. Pretty much every job we've ever been on has 1/2-inch rebar. So I don't, if you're going to use these, just get some 1/2-inch rebar. It's cheaper. It works perfect. So there's really no reason to go up to the 5/8. And we've had very, very few orders for those. So pretty much everything we sell is for 1/2-inch rebar.
Okay, the next question, which you've already kind of answered, is what about rebar mats? People are always asking that, especially if they're pouring a 4-inch slab.
Here's what we're looking at. So you have your rebar that's pounded down into the ground. Obviously, these are the ones that you'd use for a vapor barrier. But you pound your rebar down into the ground. Using these, this is 2.25 inch. The top of your rebar will be 2.25 inch below your grade. So once that's set to grade, you can put your rebars on there, or put your screed chairs on there. And then this is a 2-inch pipe, 2-inch outside diameter pipe. And so this top of this pipe is your grade. So you can see the difference. So when we pull this pipe down, you can see how much of a void this is going to leave. And this is why this needs to be filled. So on this, hand me your rebar. Okay, so your rebar mat sits underneath here. So if it's a 4-inch, this is 2-inch right here. If it's a 4-inch slab, then the top of this rebar, this is a 1/2-inch rebar, and you put another one on here. Now you're going to be 1 inch. You only have 1 inch off the ground to the bottom of your rebar. So in order to get that up higher, you would have to use 1.5 inch round bar, or if we went to the flat bar. Okay, so this size here is for a 2-inch flat bar. This size here is for 1.5 inch flat bar. So same principle. You put them down. All I have here is a 2-inch flat bar. But so if you see this, you can see the 2-inch flat bar. You can see we're about 5/8 of an inch from the top of the bar to the top of the screed chair. But if you look at the 1.5 inch flat bar, or the low profile, you can see that we're about 1.125 inches below. So you can use this low profile with the 2-inch flat bar. And if you want to get your rebar up higher, then you would have to use 1.5 inch bar. And then now when you put your rebars in there, you're 2 inches from the top of the 1.5 inch bar to the bottom of this top rebar. So if you have a rebar mat in there, now your rebar mat is directly centered in a 4-inch slab. So that's where we would use these low profile along with 1.5 inch flat bar is to get your rebar mat centered in a 4-inch slab. Anything bigger than that, anything like a 5-inch slab or anything else, you obviously can get it centered. You have plenty of room to center it. Well, we have a tool so if you set your string line to grade, to your concrete grade, and then we have a tool that you pound these down to a little bit below the string line, then you use your tool and it will set it to whichever screed chair. There's a little pointer. There's 3 different pointers, or a couple different pointers that set it to whatever screed chair you're using, and that'll set it to your string, so you don't have to measure off your string for each one of these. It goes really quick.
But what we can talk about too is if you want to put that rail back in, a lot of people's concerns is that the screed chairs don't sit low enough. But as you can see right here, I mean, even on the regular ones for a 2-inch bar, you can see how much farther down it's sitting. So when you leave the screed chairs in, and people that call and are worried about that, we'll tell them to just buy the low profiles and use the 2-inch bar if they're really that concerned, because you're sitting even farther down in the mud with these low profile ones.
Right, and you can buy these. You can buy these flat bars. I mean, they come stock. You can buy 2.5-inch. You can buy 3-inch. This is normally when we pour. This is what we use. We use the 2-inch flat bar with these, with the regular ones. So if we're doing a rebar mat though, in only a 4-inch slab, then we will use the low profile with an 1.5-inch flat bar. That's the only time. Usually the only time we'll use these other ones is for that rebar mat. And you can still use everything regular in your rebar mat. You can still set all your rebar chairs to center your rebar mat, and then it could just dive down a little bit, a 1/2 inch lower underneath your bar, your flat bar here. So it's not really that big of a deal.
So the next question is what about vapor barriers with screed chairs?
Okay, this is our answer for vapor barrier. So this is exactly what it looks like. It's a pretty heavy plate. They're 4-inch by 4-inch. We do have notches in there, so you can screw this down to, to decking, but usually you'll have your vapor barrier, and then you'll just set these, and then you'll have to go through, if you're setting your string line, then you can set your string line. Say you're using a flat bar like this, you could set your string line to it's 2.5 inches. If you're using this with this flat bar, it'd be 2.5 inches below grade. It would be to the top of your rebar, and so you'd have to go through and either shoot them with a laser and cut them. So these usually come 6 inches. We build them like this. We can build these at any length, but usually 6 inches, and then you'll just shoot your grade with a laser, and you cut these off, and then you set your screed chairs on top of that, and they're pretty hard to tip over, especially once you get concrete in there. Some places won't allow you to puncture the vapor barrier, so if you can puncture the vapor barrier, then you would just pound these straight through the vapor barrier into the ground and do everything just normal, and you can seal around those. And if they don't want the rebar coming up into the concrete, which we've never had that issue, but we've had people say that the engineers don't want the rebar going into the ground and coming up through the vapor barrier. So they make this fiberglass rebar, which works just the same. It'll never rust. You can use this. Our screed chairs work with this fiberglass. This stuff's available everywhere, and there's more and more people using it, so it's very strong. You just cut it with a grinder, and you can pound these down through the vapor barrier and then just seal around it, and there's no complaint from engineers over that. So that should take care of any issues with vapor barrier using screed chairs. And by using the screed chairs, you're able to use roller screeds when you're pouring on vapor barrier. So it honestly works really, really well.
So the next question is, and Todd can probably answer this one, is what kinds of screeds can I use with screed chairs?
Well, you can use a board. You can use a roller screed. I have the vibrating screed. I don't know. You could pretty much use any screed you have.
There was a company that called us last month that they're pouring. I think they're doing a big pour in Tennessee, but they're doing some sort of dam, and they were getting screed chairs, and I think they were using a big truss screed. And his whole thing is the truss screed will reach the full length, but he was worried about dips in the middle, so he wanted to run a row of chairs in the middle, just so that truss screed has no shot of bending in that middle. So you could use truss screeds on it too.
On a vapor barrier, this is never going to sink. You put this on the gravel, and this will never sink because of the size of this plate. So, but if you're pounding this into the ground and you're using a really heavy screed, like a big roller screed or a truss screed, then something you may want to do is, here's two different options we do. So we do make these. These are just a 2" by 2" square washer with a 1/2 inch hole. So it fits over the rebar. And so say we pounded that rebar down into the ground, and you get, you know, about an inch, 1/2 inch or an inch above where this is supposed to be. You can just take a tack welder. You can buy, you know, just the little flux core welders. You can buy those for under $200. You know, and anybody in construction that doesn't have one should have one. We always use them, but you could just tack these onto the rebar, and then finish pound that to grade, and this isn't going to sink once it hits the sand or the ground, softer ground. This is going to hold that rebar from sinking, especially if you're using a heavy screed. And we also have these others, slip-on grade plates, which do the same thing, and these will just slide on. Sometimes you got to tap them on, but usually if you twist them around, you can find the spot. So as you pound these down, they grip onto these grooves on the rebar. So you'll pound that down, and that should keep your rebar from sinking. So if you're just doing normal screeding and your ground's pretty hard, you probably don't need these plates. But if you're going to use a heavy screed, or your ground is soft at all, then you'll definitely want grade plates. Usually when we pour, some areas our ground's hard. Most of the time our ground's not really that hard. So most of our pours, if we're using roller screed, we'll use grade plates, just to make sure that we don't have anything that sinks. And when you get your grade plates put on, you can walk on that rail and you have no issues at all. So usually we'll pour, for every screed chair we have, we usually put a grade plate on.
Okay, so the next question is, what else can I use screed chairs for?
We use them all the time for pouring footings. So usually, say if we're doing a house where we're at, we don't do slabs on grades. Sometimes you do, and you could use them to pour your footings. You just set one on each side of your footing, and you have your rails, so you're not having to form it up. You just use your dirt. You dig it out, so your dirt is the side of your forms. So we'll dig it out maybe, 16 inches to 2 foot wide, depending on what it's calling for. Anything commercial, we'll do it that way, where you're pouring, a concrete slab. So we'll do our footings, and then you have to pour stem wall where we're at, because we've got to be down below the frost line. But so we'll do our footings, and we'll use our 2 rows of screed chairs, and sometimes we'll just use 1 row of screed chairs down the middle. But as you pour, you just screed off those screed chairs, with usually it's a little screed, little on a pole, but we'll screed off that, and that does our footings. But we do have some guys in our area that what they'll do is they'll set these up, and they don't form their footings at all, and they'll pour their footings really, really dry, and they'll use 2 rails. They'll just set their rails, and they pour their footings for houses and everything just right on the ground, no forms, no dirt, and that's all they use. And they pour it, say, at a 1 or 1.5 slump, so it doesn't really flow out the sides, and they pour these really thick footings. They've done that ever since we started concrete or construction. That was, many, many years ago, and that's how they've always poured, and it works great. So that's one thing you could use it for, is for footings. It really does speed up the process, not having to over dig and
Set forms.
So, and I think we have several videos on us using these to pour footings. But then we've had people buy these that are landscapers that are doing brickwork or landscape block.
Pavers.
Pavers, yeah, and they will use the screed chairs to set their sand levels, which works perfect. So you can screed your. I mean, we still use, when we do our gravel, when we set our gravel, we'll set up rows of screed chairs, the same rows that we're going to use to pour off of, but we'll actually use those rails to screed our gravel. So all of our gravel's perfect. We don't have, we don't have humps or dips. It's perfect gravel every time. And once you see how much concrete you waste, either if you're too deep, you're wasting concrete. If you're too high, you're ripping off the customers. So it's good to get your gravel right on, or as close as you possibly can, and that's why we'll screed our gravel going off the screed rails.
Okay, so the last two questions are just quick ones. This one we've already answered, but can you reuse them? Yes. If you can reach them, reuse them, but we don't go out in the middle of the mud to pull them out. We're not going to ruin what we've already done. And then the final question is, what are these things called? Because we've heard a number of names recently.
These things have been around since the 20s, so you can look these up in different variations, different versions, lots of different names. You could look them up in the patent offices. There's different versions that have been used since the 20s, and they've called them, pin caps, pin heads, screed chairs, even clear back then.
Yokes. Viking hats.
Yep, Viking hats. So there's lots of different. I mean, I'm sure there's tons more if we started looking them up, but some of these don't make sense. Some of the names, like a pinhead or pin cap, doesn't make sense at all. A Viking hat, I can see. With these ones, I could see why they would call it a Viking hat. But a screed chair, they should be maybe like a screed rail chair or something like that. But screed chair is kind of short, and we do call them screed rail chairs all the time, but screed chair kind of, I have seen some of the early patents where somebody has called them screed chairs, but that's the name that we, once we started putting these out, that's kind of the name that we use as screed chair, because it's a little more descriptive, because you got rebar chairs, people understand rebar chairs, and so screed chairs, at least you can associate that with screeding.
The interesting thing too is, I know you guys mentioned that we've been building these for what, like over 10 years, 10, 15 years maybe?
Over 15 years.
When you guys first started building them, you called them screed chairs, right? You were the first to call them screed chairs. And we even got the domain names.
It's a pretty funny name, because we used to call them pin caps before we started building them. And me and Bill were sitting out there in the office, and we're like, gosh, this name really sucks. We're like, it doesn't even make sense of what this is. And I think Bill's the one that came up with, let's call them screed chairs. And I was like, man, that's a great idea. And then as soon as we started calling them screed chairs, all the other people that sold like the plastic ones all switched their name to screed chairs too. So it all makes sense, Yokes.
Pin caps.
Yeah,
Pinheads.
pin caps.
Yeah, they all had different names, but it was funny because as soon as we put them out as screed chairs, within a year, all the plastic ones, everybody started switching their name to screed chairs. And then Bill invented that tool, that I don't have it in here, but to get the right measurement for each one of these. And then we started seeing other people come up with the same tool, just a little bit different variation. So, but it's a great idea, it all works. So,
yeah, and pretty much, I mean, we every once in a while you'll see a metal version of screed chair that people put out. Most of them, everything you see is plastic. For you to buy these from us, we sell them cheaper than the plastics, so which shouldn't even be possible, but we figured out a way to manufacture these to where we can at least we can compete with the plastic, and ours is far superior to plastic. These will hold up forever. They very rarely do they break. Every once in a while you do get some bad welds, but we try to catch those through the process, so you don't get any with bad welds. And if you were able to pull these out, you could reuse them indefinitely. So even with a little rust on them, it's not going to hurt anything. They're still usable.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just the biggest thing of why people should use screed chairs, and we'll probably do its own video down the line, is this is one of the easiest ways, if not the easiest way, to screed concrete, because you cannot screw it up. You set your grade before the truck even gets there, so you don't even have to worry about that. And if you got grade plates on there, for sure your rail's not sinking. But I mean, if you got your ground set and it's pretty packed, then you're fine just pounding the rebars down in there. But this honestly is the easiest way to pour concrete, especially flat work. And if you've ever done it, it's really hard to ever go back, because this is just way too easy.
And you have to, when you're pouring with roller screed, you can get away with vibrating screeds, where you see people all the time will shoot their grades into the wet mud and then use their vibrating screeds to go off of that. And you've got to be really good, and even the really good people, you still get that screed will, it's still, just watch videos on it and you can see it moving up and down the whole time they're pouring. So it may look flat, but it's going to be somewhat wavy. And using a roller screed, it rides on these rails. You have to have something for that roller screed to ride on. And if you look at a lot of the big laser screeds, it's the same thing. They have rollers on the front of them, and they still vibrate, but they use big rollers on the front of those laser screeds, and it's the same principle. We don't have the cost involved with the many hundreds of thousands of dollar laser screed. But if you look at the roads, when they pour the concrete roads, they're using roller screeds on those big machines. They have big rollers and you don't see 500 guys out there raking concrete. They pour, they just come in empty trucks onto the road, and then these big roller screeds attached to these big machines, you see them, they just come through, and they have augers that move the concrete to where it needs to be, and then they have roller screeds behind it to finish it. So this is not a new idea. People have just taken the idea from these, massive machines and moved it to where it's usable for everyday concrete guys. So if you're not using roller screeds, and I understand maybe there's a lot of areas you can't get the roller screed into, but if you're not using them, you really need to look into them, because you're up off the ground, number one, you're not bent over screeding, and it's so fast. It's so much faster. And we're gonna do a video just showing how much faster, how much more efficient, the number of guys you need to pour. We'll go into depth into this, because I don't think people understand how fast it is and how accurate it is using a roller screed opposed to any other version. We could even compare a roller screed to some of these smaller laser screeds. The roller screed's going to be much faster, and once you see them work, you'll understand why people are starting to go to them. They've been around for a long time, so everybody should be using them, but what we're finding out is they're not. Everybody in our area uses them. Very, very few people in our area, some of the really old timers, they don't use them, but most everybody that in our area, they use roller screeds. I think it's one of the best ways for the money to screed concrete.
So I guess the last thing is, I just wanted to go over, once again, I'll probably do this every video, go over all the different stores and locations that you can get these. If you're in California, we are in Valley Construction Supply, we are in Hard Hat Construction Supply, we are in Squires Lumber, and we are also in Whitecap. So if you're anywhere near a Whitecap, doesn't matter where you're at, you can go get these. If your Whitecap does not have them stocked, they can get them stocked for you. If you are in Seattle, we are in Stoneway Construction. And if you are in
Construction Supply,
excuse me. And if you are in Oklahoma or Texas, we are in CMC. And then if you're in Idaho, we are also in Franklin. So there's lots of stores we're always trying to get into, because we have lots of people all the time want the stuff overnighted. And it's just too hard for us to do that because the products are kind of heavier. Plus, once it leaves our warehouse, who knows if it'll even show up on time, even after you pay the extra money. So if you want these in your local store, go inside, talk to your salesman, talk to the branch manager, and tell them to get a hold of us, or call us and tell us what stores you want them in, and we will get them in there. But you can also get them on Amazon. You can get them on eBay. And then if you want to get them from our website directly, you can use code REDLINE at checkout to save 10%, I believe is what we still have it set as. So, yeah, I mean, you can always still buy directly from us.
One thing about Amazon is we're usually fully stocked on Amazon, and so depending on where you are, you may be able to get them same day or overnighted. So if you need them right away and they're not in your local store where you can just go pick them up, then check Amazon. I mean, you have to be a Prime member to get it overnight shipping, but Amazon usually can ship much faster than we can. And so a lot of times I'll tell people, you know, go try Amazon. Maybe you can get them overnighted. Maybe you can get them same day. So
yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, ask them down in the comments below. Let us know if you are using Screed chairs or roller screeds. If you are, tag us on social media. We have people send us videos all the time, tagging us in them, showing us that they're using Screed chairs or that they're using roller screeds, or they're sending us videos that they want us to react to or ask our opinions on. So feel free to send all sorts of stuff to us. So, but that is it. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.